The interactions between provider and patient within healthcare settings are the core of delivering positive patient outcomes. Within those interactions is a need for clear and responsive dialogue that contributes to the provider getting their message across to the patient in such a way that the patient understands and can put into practice the care being offered. To engage in this dialogue, there is a general perspective referred to as cultural humility that can be helpful. Cultural humility is a lifelong process of self-reflection and self-critique, whereby the individual not only learns about another's culture, but one starts with an examination of her or his own beliefs and cultural identities. To put cultural humility into the practice of dialogue, there are several principles that together help in the creation of generative dialogue, where information is not simply shared, but grown through an appreciation of each person's perspective. Those principles are referred to here as the 5 A's. In the scenario that follows, the 5 principles will be explored through questions to reflect on and shown through a dialogue between a provider and their patient. The A of acknowledge. How to acknowledge your patient's unique cultural perspective. Pre-visit. Things to consider before you see the patient. Acknowledge. As healthcare providers, it is important to understand that everyone, both providers and patients, have their own unique worldview and perspective on healthcare and technology. Because of this, good multicultural care begins with acknowledging how the patient's personal experience and your own may impact your individual perspectives on incorporating digital health technology into care. Start a conversation with your patient by first acknowledging that you each have an individual worldview on digital health technology. An idea of some questions to ask your patient. How familiar are you with how technology relates to treatment options? For example, checking symptoms on a website before a medical appointment. How comfortable are you with using health technology to support your medical treatment? When recommending digital health tools to patients, ask yourself, does my professional or educational background include knowledge on using this digital health tool? If not, what training or clinical experience do I need to acquire to use this tool and recommend it to patients? Let's look at an example of this kind of conversation in action.
Hello. My personal training may put me at an advantage for understanding the digital health tool I want to introduce to you. With that in mind, any questions you have are appreciated, and I want you to leave here feeling supported.
Thank you. I'm a little nervous even coming to see you, and I've often felt before that nobody listened to where I was coming from.
Does your smartphone or tablet have any apps that you are familiar with?
I do have apps that I'm familiar with, though my kids think I'm a dinosaur because I only use it to make phone calls.
I know what you mean. I can't even understand my kids these days when they get into texting, but that's why I wanted to ask you about your experience so we're on the same page. A digital health tool is an app, document, instructional video, or something similar that you interact with through a device or on the internet. There are ways of expanding health interventions in a non-intrusive way that you will, hopefully, find easy to bring into your life.
I think I understand that. I've heard others talk about mindfulness apps on their phone. Is it something like that?
That's it, exactly. And mindfulness is a great place to start because there are so many options to choose from, and you're here to get help about anxiety.
All right, I'm pretty new to this. Do you mind showing me how that would work?
Absolutely. How about we each take out our phones, and I'll show you how to download the app and get started.
Yeah, that'd be great, thanks.
Acknowledging each person's unique view on digital health will help to improve patient-provider communication and help the provider incorporate the appropriate information to support the patient in successfully using digital health tools. Once we acknowledge the role that backgrounds play in affecting the use of digital health tools, we can then begin to assess the level of tech literacy that the patient has. Assessing is the next in the 5 A's. The A of assess. How to assess your patient's technological literacy. During the visit, things to consider within the appointment. Assess. As healthcare providers, we may often have a greater degree of familiarity and knowledge concerning digital health technology than patients. This knowledge may lead to assumptions about how such technology should be or would be used. actively seek to understand how patients may use health technology in their lives with a focus on concrete outcomes. Some questions to ask your patient. What is your internet situation at home, and do you have easy access to mobile devices? What kind of apps do you use, and how often do you find yourself using them on a daily basis? When assessing patient capacity and interest in health technology, ask yourself, if I were to use this explanation for the digital health technology to a random person, would they understand? Has my interest in promoting this health technology gotten in the way of listening to patient concerns? Let's look at an example of this kind of conversation in action.
I can get pretty excited about helping patients use a new tool. So first, I want you to know my goal is to recommend the one that works best for you.
Thank you. I have so many apps on my phone, sometimes I don't even remember what I have on it.
Thank you for letting me know that. I've been in a similar space before, even finding myself getting excited about a new app, only to never use it again after a few days.
Exactly. I want something that's easy to use and that I can see the benefit from.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because you losing interest in the app is exactly what I'm hoping to avoid. With that in mind, what kind of health apps have you used before?
I have an app for my insurance, though it does confuse me, and I've gotten really into mindfulness lately, so I have a few for that.
Mindfulness is a very important skill to develop. That's great you're working on it. Can I assume that you have a good enough internet connection to access the apps when you want?
Not everywhere. My signal drops in weird places, but generally at home I can get online.
I definitely hear you on signal dropping, especially when it seems there shouldn't be a problem. I'm glad to hear it works at your home though, as this has to do with access and developing a plan for how you're going to use digital health.
The A of avoid. How to avoid assuming a level of patient understanding and use of health technology. During the visit, things to consider as you discuss the health technology with the patient. Avoid. As healthcare providers, it may be part of your life to incorporate healthy habits. This is encouraged by the daily acknowledgement of and promotion of such habits in the lives of your patients. This frame of reference is not one shared by the typical patient, as they are not often coming from a medical background. Avoiding assumptions about how a health technology will be used stems directly from assessing the capacity and capability of the patient. Some questions to ask your patient. How comfortable are you using this health technology on a daily basis? Have you had any challenges starting a new habit? What got in your way? When recommending digital health tools to patients, ask yourself, as a healthcare professional, how often do I have to keep reminding myself to keep track of my own health habits? Does my professional or educational background make it easier for me to see the benefits of this health technology? Let's look at an example of this kind of conversation in action.
I'm really glad we were able to identify your level of access to this health technology and discuss your interests and concerns about bringing a new habit into your life.
Thank you. I've had doctors simply tell me what to do, and then I get home and I find out that I don't have the resources to do it correctly. It's been pretty frustrating.
I'm sorry to hear that. Not being heard can feel dismissive, and I want to acknowledge any unique challenges you may have.
I appreciate feeling like I'm being heard. Can we talk more about the health technology you mentioned?
Definitely. But first, I'd like to know how you use the apps you mentioned previously. Do you use them daily? Do you find yourself using them at a particular time of the day or connected to certain situations?
Yeah, I wish I used mindfulness every day, but I don't. I usually remember it just as I'm going to bed or when I'm under more stress than usual.
That makes sense. It tends to be easier to remember the good habits we can practice when we're winding down at the end of the day. I'm glad to hear you're thinking of these tools when under stress though, because that's one of the times they can be really helpful.
Does that mean I only need to use this when I'm feeling bad?
I apologize. That wasn't my intent. While it's a good thing to use these tools when under greater stress, we want this to be one of the healthy habits throughout your life. So kind of like getting into a daily exercise regimen, rather than only training when you want to look good at the beach.
That makes a lot of sense. What's the best way to use this?
Let's talk about how you think you're going to use this health technology and how it's going to affect your health goals. Once we go through the recommendations of ways to use this health app, we will discuss how best to fit this app into your lifestyle.
That definitely makes it more personal. Thanks.
Avoiding assumptions about how a patient will use a particular health technology can be a difficult task. We all come with previous ways of implementing new habits into our lives based on the unique experiences we've had. By engaging in an honest conversation about technology use, the patient feels more comfortable seeing how the health technology is used and provides more information to you to ask clarifying questions on implementing the strategy you have in mind. Asking is the next 2 steps in the 5 A's. The A's of ask: how to ask the patient to repeat recommendations, and ask the feasibility of implementing the prescription. During the visit, things to consider while talking with the patient. Ask: the words we use have an assumed meaning for us that ties into the message we're trying to send. This basic assumption can make it difficult to see how those words and the message can get lost in translation. While asking for clarification and giving directions can feel like wasting time, taking the time is far better than having the health strategy not implemented, or done in a way that was unhelpful or even harmful. Some clarifying questions to ask your patient. Would you mind repeating back to me the plan we just discussed? How exactly are you going to be using the health technology to match the plan we discussed? When recommending digital health tools to patients, ask yourself, how much professional jargon did I use, and was it needed to get my point across? Was I confused by anything the patient said, and how can I exhibit best practices for increasing understanding through dialogue? Let's look at an example of this kind of conversation in action.
Thank you for taking the time to chat with me about how you're going to use this health technology. My primary goal is to ensure we're on the same page when it comes to addressing your needs.
Thank you as well. I feel like you've heard me, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this can help me.
That's great! Now that we've gone over the health technology tool and addressed concerns over being able to use it, I want to make sure my directions are clear. Sometimes words or phrases that I use make sense to me, but aren't clear to others. Would you mind telling me, in your own words, how you're going to use this new tool?
Yeah, I understand. Sometimes I think I'm being clear as well, and then realize my spouse didn't understand anything I just said. If I heard you correctly, I'm going to be checking in with this app at least once a day and filling out the personal evaluation of what I'm feeling so you can look at any trends that might be happening.
That's it exactly. Thank you. We really want to keep track of how you're building this into your life and making explicit connections to how doing that leads to better health outcomes for you personally.
Well, that's certainly what I want.
I'm so glad we've been able to take the time to be clear and understand one another. Are there any concerns about sharing this information through my team or with me during a follow-up appointment?
I feel comfortable sharing this with you. Is this something that's only going to be seen by you?
Other staff, like nurses, may be able to see it, but like any information you share, we make sure it's securely handled and only used for the purposes we've discussed.
Okay, I understand that.
Great! If any questions come up in your use of this technology at home, please don't hesitate to reach out. Sometimes, no matter how much we work to identify concerns, the lived experience brings up issues we could not see coming. I want you to know you'll be supported through those situations.
Thank you. I'm excited to see how this helps.
Asking for clarification from the patient empowers them by putting their treatment into their own frame of reference. In other words, by getting clear on how the health technology is to be used in their own life and through their own unique perspective, the patient has greater ownership of the process being implemented. In conclusion, the 5 A's provide a structure for generative dialogue, where information is not simply being shared back and forth, but understood through a process of broadening awareness of the unique life of every person.